All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's 2 o'clock. Let's start the March 21st meeting of our Public Safety and Justice Committee. Ask you all to take a seat and phones on silent or vibrate. I've got, Madam Clerk, are these are speaker cards for today, for this meeting, or is this the prior meeting? Clean, I think this is the prior meeting. Wait, this is public comment. Scott, Susan, are you here? Are these comment cards for this meeting, or is this for a prior meeting? For this meeting. Okay, let's see what we've got here. Excuse me one second. Public, this is 2, this is 2, this is 4, public comment. Okay, I think we're good. Thank you. And to help our clerk out and expedite things, why don't we start, Doctor, with you, and we'll do the equivalent of roll call and introductions. Oops, we need to get your microphone on.
Talk loudly. We did this last time, didn't we?
Okay.
Good afternoon, Dr. Jordan, Medical Examiner, Coroner's Office.
Jeff Rosen, District Attorney.
Kathy Martinez, Deputy Chief, in for Chief Garnett.
Thank you.
Carl Nussel, Department of Correction.
Good afternoon, Molly O'Neill, Public Defender's Office.
Lori Smith, Sheriff's Office.
Aaron Johnson, Pretrial Services.
Thank you. Mike Wasserman, District 1 Supervisor.
Ken Yeager, District 4 Supervisor.
Miguel Marquez, Chief Operating Officer.
Wendy Both, Assistant County Counsel.
Gary Hersig, Deputy County Executive.
Sylvia Perez McDonald, IDEO Director.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Item 2 is public comment, where anyone can speak about anything not on today's agenda. We ask that you fill out a card, which I believe are in the back, and you drop them off. Oh, they're up here in the front, then drop them off in the plastic container. And I've got cards from Susan Bassey and Scott Largent under item number 2, public comment. If you'll each please come up here, you'll have up to 3 minutes to speak on any item not on today's agenda. Oh, excuse me, I've also got a card from Steve Eckert. There you are, Steve, for also item number 2. Oop, and Christina Yee. All right, we'll go in that order. You can come up in whatever order you get there first. Fire away, Scott.
Today's meeting, I was looking forward to talking more about the video footage from our courthouse. I was looking forward to talking about how that policy, how there's that gray area between our sheriff's department policy, our county drafted policy. 13 months that footage is supposed to be kept before it's destroyed. If an internal affairs investigation's open, then that evidence is preserved. It's a different story at our courthouse right now. They destroy things in 2 weeks. So I'm not very happy with that. And I felt that this would have been the good opportunity. Most everybody from each department has made it here today. And if the head of the department is not able to make it, then they send whoever's second in charge. You guys are pretty good about doing that. And what happened today? Our presiding judge is not here. She is normally late to these meetings. Now, I'm sure she has a county sticker for parking. I'm sure she can park right where all the judges park, right next to the Santa Clara County Courthouse. I think it's important for her to be here to hear the complaints and criticism from the public. How is that possible that data is being destroyed at our new courthouse? That new surveillance system has the capabilities of holding hundreds of years worth of video footage and audio. How would it be destroyed in 2 weeks? I do not agree with that. For Susan's trial that's coming up right now, that was explained in the discovery information, and pretty much, it's just, hey, the stuff doesn't exist, it's not here. Victorious Alexander is going through the same thing right now. He's been assigned, I believe his name's Sharkey, and he's been assigned through the IDO. So Victorious has been trying to request, Sylvia Perez, he's been trying to request sculpatory evidence that he's being denied. It's almost a funny thing when we go over to Sharkey's office next door to the new family courthouse, because we're laughing and joking in there and we say, hey, we want the video footage. Why would the DA's office just have supplied stills? They're just stilled images. And why would we not want to provide all the footage for him? So he has his correct, right day in court. There's 56 cameras out there. They would have showed him leave from the actual jail. It would have showed him walking down the road. They will not request that information. He already went through them running the probation violation first, and then they dropped the underlying charges for what happened in here. So that's already going through now, the appellate process on that, because we're fighting to get him back in here. We're fighting for his First Amendment right. We're fighting for Susan's First Amendment right, and we're also fighting for mine. You guys are not playing fair, and you guys really aren't playing fair over there at the DA's office. We're not a gang. We're civil society activists that are speaking up for our community, and Jeff Rosen, you're dragging us through the mud. You need to wake up, bud. This is unacceptable. And Victoria shouldn't have to go through what he's going through right now, and same with Susan.
Thank you,
And
Scott.
my malicious prosecution
Scott, your
over a
time's up.
megaphone that I
You know
couldn't
the
get a
rules.
permit for was
Scott.
unacceptable also.
Thank you.
The community's not happy.
Ms. Bassi.
Thank you. Scott Largent may be an example that chivalry is not dead in our society. I was hoping, too, that Patricia Lucas would be here today. When Patricia Lucas decided to give up her job where she was making almost $800,000 a year as an attorney, she commented that she had enough money to put her boys through school. She sounds like she's a divorced mom, and we sounded like we were in a similar situation, and she wanted to make a difference. And she took the job and ultimately is responsible for building our new family courthouse and soliciting private funds for that courthouse and operating that courthouse today that is supposed to give more access to justice to people. I've lived in this community my whole life, and most of my life, and my children have been raised in this community. And in the schools where my children attended school, we taught them that they should be obeying laws and obeying rules. And this morning, my son texted me from the Midwest, and he said, "Mom, I just saw a middle-aged woman get hit by a car, and it rattled me." And I responded to him to be safe and not jaywalk and not do things, and I promised him that I wouldn't jaywalk. But what was interesting is all the things that we teach our children about safety that you guys are all charged to address in our community, we're missing the biggest part, and that's what's going on in our family courts. And Sheriff Smith, you're aware that one of your deputies broke my hand while I was experiencing Scott Largent being retaliated against and excessive force like I've never experienced in my life. Last night I went home and watched your documentary where you talked about all the things related to Audrey and Larry Pott and how this has been pitched in what we call access journalism. There's a narrative where we're describing what happened to Audrey Pott, but you're leaving out part of that story. And that's the story about the domestic violence that you knew was documented, and Jeff Rosen, you knew was documented between the Potts before they ever landed in a situation of dealing with Audrey's death. You completely have forgotten what these kids are dealing with at home, the violence that's going on in home. And I'm being retaliated against because I'm investigating it. I'm investigating the hundreds of people who have come to me about their court transcripts being altered in legal hearings in our county. I have sent numerous complaints to the district attorney's office dating back to 2014 where John Chase, who is in charge of our public integrity, simply blew me off, as every other DA has blown off people making false claims about domestic violence, which you know to have existed related to Clyde Berg's case. And Sheriff Smith, you did the right thing in that. But we're not doing the right thing most of the time, and you and Jeff Rosen don't have your act together. You're advancing your political careers, and you're harming the people in this county, and you need to stop. We're going to keep investigating. You can keep arresting me for doing it, but I'm going to keep doing it, and I'm going to keep speaking up for the people who can't.
Thank you, Mr. Eckert. And then Christina Yee.
Good afternoon, Supervisor Wasserman, Supervisor Yeager, and county leadership. I'm CEO, Steve Eckert, and I'm CEO of Allen Rock Counseling Center, and I thank you for this opportunity to speak with you today. In addition to being a member of the Behavioral Health Contractors Association, Allen Rock Counseling Center is a proud member of the Silicon Valley Council of Nonprofits, and that's who I'm here on behalf of today. We're your partner, and we appreciate President Simitian's shining light on the partnerships that we have with CBOs in Santa Clara County. Allen Rock Counseling Center serves 3,700 children, youth, and family members each year with 80 to 100 staff. We do this with a $7.5 million budget with government contracts, foundations, and our own fundraising. 80% of our participants are Latino, and 75% of our direct service staff are bilingual. As you may know, next Tuesday is our annual luncheon, and Supervisor Dave Cortese will receive Allen Rock Counseling Center's Super Role Model Award for his leadership in areas including youth, education, and immigrant rights. Supervisor Cindy Chavez, last year's award winner, will help me present this award next Tuesday. In terms of our contracts, our behavioral health contract is multifaceted. So for children and families with children 0 to 5, we have a program that provides home visiting, therapy services, and also developmental assessments. We have a status offender contract working with 601s and 602s, and that also has a 24/7 mobile crisis component, and aftercare counseling. We have school-based counseling in over 50 schools, parent support groups, and an outpatient family counseling clinic on our East San Jose site. We also have a contract with probation, providing counseling and case management and life skills for low-level juvenile offenders through probation's PEI program. We also have a contract with social services to provide parent advocates. Those are parents who have been through the CPS system, who are there to help support other parents who are now going through that system. And then we have additional funding through the City of San Jose for our truancy programs, our mentoring programs, and then we do our own fundraising to help support that. We have a mentoring program that pairs community volunteers one-to-one with youth at Ocala Middle School. And our biggest challenge is recruiting and retaining staff. They can't afford to live here, and we're not meeting the demand that they're here to serve. Our biggest assets. Oops.
Thank you very much.
And I have
Appreciate
some
it.
brochures.
You can leave those there, and the clerk will pick them up. Thank you. Ms. Shee, come on forward.
Thank you.
This will be our final speaker under public comment, item number 2.
Good afternoon. My name is Christina Yee, and I am the Interim Executive Director for Breakout Prison Outreach, also known as California Youth Outreach. We work with high-risk, gang-impacted youth, adults, and their families who are also dealing with issues of incarceration, substance abuse, financial instability, and homelessness. Our agency has provided a variety of service from street outreach and case management to anti-criminal thinking groups and mentoring. Also in a variety of settings, including hotspot neighborhoods in East San Jose to Juvenile Hall and James Ranch. We are helping to minimize violence in our communities and to assist individuals in becoming self-sufficient, productive citizens. I'm here to speak on behalf of the Silicon Valley Nonprofits Group to speak on the value of the direct partnership that our agency and other CBOs like us bring to the county. We are currently contracted to provide reentry services to men and women recently released from incarceration. The Good Samaritan Project at Cathedral of Faith is one of 4 centers where people can walk in and get real needs met, like basic clothing, food, hygiene, shelter, housing, jobs. We know what our clients need. You gave us and our clients an opportunity to speak, and together we have had many discussions on the challenges our clients face and the possible solutions to get their needs met and to be successful. We took action. You listened and leveraged your authority and resources, and together we help clients gain faster access to resources they need and thereby eliminating excuses as to why they cannot succeed. We are innovative. You thought outside of the box and you tried something new. The Faith-Based Reentry Resource Center is a result of that. And we are working together to connect individuals to the faith community where they can get their spiritual needs met and be surrounded by positive role models as they continue on their road to recovery. We have started out as an innovative project, and it's now a valuable service to our community. Together, we have made an impact. We are your partners. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes item number 2, public comment. Supervisor and committee members, we move on to item number 3, which is approval of the consent calendar, which only includes item number 7. And Supervisor Yeager, I have 2 speaker cards under consent calendar regarding the minutes. Mr. Large and Ms. Bassey, the 2 of you again, come on forward, and this is regarding the minutes from the last meeting.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Scott Largent. As we received the minutes from last meeting that I was at, and
Excuse me just a second, I need to start the timer. Thank you.
Oh, no
Go
worries.
ahead.
There we go. Sooner or later, I'll have my own little button to turn it on. As we receive these minutes, what I'm really wondering is, are we really listening to the public? So my concerns that were brought up in public comment, the items that I filled speaker cards out for last meeting, was any of that stuff ever addressed? Were any of my community complaints ever addressed? Was any of my hard work coming down here every single day, was any of it at all listened to? I'm not sure. I'm really confused about that. I'd like to thank our presiding judge, Patricia Lucas. My name's Scott Largent. I made a comment in the open comment that I would appreciate if the court system could have a representative show up on time. You have parking that's right over there next to the courthouse right there. I'm sure you have a county sticker. You can make arrangements to be here on time.
Mr. Largent, you need to stick to the minutes. You need to stick on topic.
Well, when we're discussing the minutes, the last meeting, she was late also. And the meeting before that, attendance should be mandatory and people should be on time. Is that something that's off topic? The attendance has been poor every single meeting. If I don't bring it up, it's going to be this way forever. And it's unacceptable. A presiding judge should be on time. We're supposed to be on time when we go to that courthouse over there. We get reprimanded by judges, Mike. I mean, we get held over the fire when we're late. Yet this is acceptable. It's unacceptable. And I'll give you the rest of your time back, Mike.
Thank you. Ms. Bassey.
Thank you. Ms. Lucas, I'm glad you arrived. I had made comments earlier about some public statements that you had made related to your sons when you became a judge, and I hope you will review those statements. I would like to comment on the adoption of the minutes from the consent calendar from last time. This committee is continuing to adopt minutes and is knowingly violating the Brown Act by Patricia Lucas's order that prohibited recording in the courthouse while you were holding domestic violence council meetings. And the Brown Act has been repeatedly violated, and just simply saying that you keep fixing it, it wasn't fixed even as of yesterday. This committee exists to be able to take care of the public safety and justice issues in our community. Patricia Lucas, I've been before you as a litigant. You actually ruled in my favor, so I could not be a disgruntled litigant. I appreciate that you did that and obviously did not have issues related to your rulings in that decision. It's what you're doing outside of that in your administrative capacities. And you may not have quite the experience with dealing with the public as I do, but there are a number of responsibilities that you have in sitting on this committee and when you adopt minutes and when you listen to public speakers. So I would appreciate, too, that you do that and hear what Mr. Largent is saying. He's trying to express things to you that are important for you to take back to the courts. Thank you.
All right. Supervisor Yeager, I'll look to you for a motion on item number 3. Thank you, Madam Clerk. It'll be unanimous that the minutes, item number 7, have been approved. If any committee members wish to speak about anything as we're proceeding, please just press on the button. Your microphone will light up. If you don't have a microphone, just raise your hand and I'll see you. Thank you very much. All right, we now move on to item number 4, which is to receive the semi-annual report from the Office of Reentry Services. Javier, you're right there, Javier. Javier, you're there, and before you start speaking, we have a speaker, Mr. Largent. Come on forward on item number 4. You'll have 2 minutes to speak about item number 4 relating to the Public Safety Realignment Program we call AB 109, Adult Reentry Work Plan, and other reentry services.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. I've been getting some of the literature out in the hallway. I've been kind of keeping tabs on the Reentry Center. You know, I see some neat things happening over there. I did try to use the reentry center, and I was turned away. But hopefully now other people that are in my same situation won't. When I look over these, we're allowed to help pretty much everybody in Santa Clara County that needs to use the reentry center. You know, maybe some people from other counties when they get arrested here can go use the reentry center. Everybody probably in the state of California can use the reentry center except for Victorious Alexander. He's the one person that cannot use the reentry center. And I find that extremely shady right there. Jeff Rosen's prosecuting Victorious for crossing the street to go use the reentry center. He had a dead cell phone. He needed a bus token. You know, maybe he wanted to get treatment for alcohol problems. Maybe he wanted to get back in the mental health loop. He wanted to use services from our county. He walked out of Santa Clara County Jail. He walked down the street. He used the actual sidewalk, okay? Crossed the street over there and went to use the reentry center right there. And now you guys have, what, 9 different cases against him right now? That's unacceptable, bud. You're violating them on every different possible probation violation. That's not what this thing was, I think, designed for. People should be able to leave the jail and go over there and get services. If you're going to set them up to fail, why don't you put him in a police car and maybe drive him somewhere so he can actually get out and not be charged? Maybe you should have released him from Elmwood. You're setting people up to fail, just like myself. So this is unacceptable. I do appreciate your guys' good work, though. I really do. I just don't think, I think it was a dick move what you guys did to Victorious, and he's still going through this stuff in court. Same thing with my case. Same thing with Susan's case. You guys need to throw up the white towel because we're not.
The clerk just handed me 3 cards. Ms. Bassi, I see you on items 5 and 6. And the other card does not have a name to it. So I don't know if it's for... It also says number 5. So I've got 2 on number 5. I'm sorry? I'm just 5 and 6. All right, thank you. So no others on that. All right, so now we have Javier, your presentation, please. And yours is a PowerPoint, I believe?
Yes.
Thank you. And so committee members, on your monitor, the box to your right where you've got call, microphone, and input, if you click on the input button, it'll bring up the PowerPoint on your screen. Or our clerk just did it for us. If you don't have it on there, press the input. Fire away, Javier.
Right. Good afternoon, Supervisor Wasserman, Supervisor Yeager, committee members. My name is Javier Aguirre, the Director of Office of Reentry Services. Along with me is Chad Martins, a Senior Management Analyst for the Office of Reentry Services. We're here and excited to present to you the semi-annual report relating to the public safety realignment, what we called as AB 109, the adult reentry work plan, and other reentry initiatives. Just want to identify some quick highlights, and then I'll turn it over to Chad to go through the PowerPoint presentation. Again, we really want to highlight the importance of data, what it's telling us about the services that we're offering our clients, how they're being utilized, what's being underutilized, and how we could improve linkages to the client's needs. We also are presenting to you about our Reentry Resource Center, what are some of the client requests, and how we're meeting those basic needs. It's also important to highlight our partnership with Behavioral Health Services Department, noting that they have a team at the Reentry Resource Center to screen individuals, make referrals to various community-based organizations, and then looking at a number of admissions. And finally, this report is going to be assisting us in shaping how we will craft the request for proposals for 2020. Most of all our vendors expire at the end of this year. We're planning to extend it for 1 more year and then do a comprehensive request for proposals in 2019 so they could all start to provide services. So the data that we collect now and in the next few months is going to help us identify what are the critical services that we want to provide our clients. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chad.
Thank you, Javier. Thank you, supervisors, and to the rest of the committee, good afternoon. This is just going to be a quick update on the first 2 quarters of the fiscal year. We'll be back after the fiscal year ends with a more comprehensive update with some more details. So this period is between July 1st, 2017 and December 31st, 2017. It's a 6-month period. So we're going to start off with AB 109 reentries. We usually give you a quarterly look, but this time we decided to show it by year. As you can see, 2017, we actually had a higher number of AB 109 reentries, which is interesting because the last 2 years we've been seeing a steady decrease. So it'll be important to kind of follow that and see if that continues or starts to decline again. So between October 2011 and December 2017, about 7,200 unique individuals were released from the county jails and reentered the community, and this also includes PRCS as well. And then overall, there were about 8,500 reentry events. So some of these individuals reenter more than once as they have multiple AB 109 grants. As we've seen before in past reports, PRCS is the most common type at about 44%. And demographically, not much has changed. It's still around 84% male, and over half of the realignment clients are Hispanic/Latino. So now we're going to getting into the realignment caseloads. There's the probation caseloads and the community alternative supervision program. So for probation, they're supervising PRCS and 1170 mandatory supervision. So as of December 31st, they gave us a kind of a snapshot as that day and time, and they had 1,562 individuals on that caseload at that time. 69% were active, or in other words, in compliance, and 31% had bench warrants. Something interesting to note is the 1170 MS clients appear to have a lower rate of bench warrants. However, most of these bench warrants are for minor like technical violations, so we do kind of expect them to be resolved as time goes on. So for the Custodial Alternative Supervision Program, or CASP, for the 6-month period, there were 50 entries into the program and 82 closures or dispositions. So these are kind of the outcomes. So out of those 82 outcomes, 63 were successful completions, and that's about 77%. So overall, most of these people are completing, which is a good sign because these individuals are actually serving their custody sentence in the community. So it is a public safety concern, but it's promising so far. If we look at the new law violations, there's only one new law violation at the misdemeanor level and only one at the felony level, and only one absconder in that 6-month period. So overall, most of these clients are completing the program with little to no issue. So for the Reentry Resource Center, during the 6-month period, there were 10,256 visits, and those visits were from 3,355 unique clients. Below that, you can kind of see the top requested resources. As usual, it's general assistance in CalFresh and then housing. Individuals want income, they want food stamps, and they want housing when they're released. These are their most pressing concerns. However, the top 10 lists there, all of those resources were highly requested. Thousands of individuals are requesting this each year. So if you look at the chart to the right there, the numbers per quarter of unique individuals visiting the center are pretty consistent, actually very consistent. But what is changing is the probation clients tend to be making up a greater portion of the center as time goes on, while the realignment and the other populations are decreasing a little bit relative to probation. And the other populations tend to be clients like parolees or unsupervised releases, sometimes pretrial, and also individuals that are interested in expungement. These are individuals that aren't that may have been out for several years. So when they come into the center, the clients are asked their housing status. The chart to the right shows all the answers broken down. As you can see, 15% don't typically answer the questions. So what we did on the left is we kind of took that out of the equation, and approximately 21% of clients are homeless at intake when we just assume that the rest who did answer the question are representative. And that means that 79% of clients did not have permanent housing. So while these individuals aren't often chronically homeless long term, they're going to need some assistance getting back on their feet. The center also does VI-SPDAT assessments. This is an assessment tool used by Supportive Housing and HUD to kind of screen clients and see what type of intervention level is appropriate for housing. So there were 365 VI-SPDATs conducted during the 6-month period. 54% of those were at the rapid rehousing range. This is just kind of a time-limited support for a few months till they get back on their feet. And then 41% were at the permanent supportive housing range. These are the individuals that are going to struggle to attain self-sufficiency without support. So there is quite a large percentage of these people, but luckily more need rapid rehousing. And then self-sufficiency also includes employment and education. So 84% of the clients during this period were unemployed, 62% were unemployed and looking for work. So some of these clients are disabled or they're not looking for work for other reasons, but 62% are actively looking for work when they come in. So over a third of clients are also, they don't have a GED or a diploma, and 37% do have a GED or diploma but no higher education. So obviously, without a GED, it's going to be hard to maintain gainful employment, and especially without higher education, it's also going to be difficult in an expensive area. So clients also get transition plans. Some clients in the jail, the high risk and AB 109 clients, get transition plans. So a couple weeks before they're released, a staff member in the jail will fill this out for them, and then that is sent to the reentry center, and we're able to kind of then use that when the client comes in to facilitate the service linkage process. So between July and December, these last 6 months, 759 plans were submitted for 724 individuals. So some individuals did get a couple plans. Custody Health submits the most plans by far. They submitted 513. And I kind of just provided two ways of looking at this. One on the left, the line graph, is a monthly look, and then we have quarterly numbers to the bottom right. As you can see, since July 2016, numbers have increased quite a bit. They did seem to decrease a little bit in the most previous quarter. This is probably due to the holidays, but we'll be monitoring that.
Could you go back one screen?
Yes.
7, if you would. It went by too fast for it to sink into my head. Sure. On the right side, 35% of the clients did not have a GED or high school. 37% did. What am I missing with the other 28?
So this is actually showing the top one there is clients who do not have a GED or equivalent. So these are individuals who haven't graduated high school or gotten their adult education.
Right. 37 had.
Yeah. So an additional 37% had a high school diploma or a GED, but no higher education. So if you combine those together, that's kind of the number who doesn't have a higher education. The remainder are people who do have like an AA degree or a 4-year degree.
So 28% did have, a fourth of them did have.
Yeah, and there's
a higher degree.
Correct, and some of the answers are like some college, some maybe not. Maybe they even just took a quarter, but they have experienced it. At least.
Gotcha. Thanks for that clarification.
Of course, thank you.
And then, Chad, I'm going to have you stop at that slide. I know, and this is in the report, although it's not doesn't show up on the slides, where out of the 759 plans received, 47% visited the Reentry Resource Center. Any discussion as to why many didn't, and is there anything that we can do to increase that percentage?
Sure. I think there are many possible reasons, or I think there are many reasons, but they're all kind of combined into one. So I think one of the reasons is, since Custody Health is submitting a lot of these plans, these are the very high-risk individuals. So these are the high-risk mentally ill people, the people who are struggling with substance dependency and stuff. So a lot of these people might actually not be ready to engage in the reentry process. As far as other reasons, I mean, it's really the clients are just not wanting to show up. So we have, to rectify that, we have increased like brochures and posters and stuff like that, but we're continually working on outreach, and we go in and do presentations from time to time. We're working on increasing that. So we are trying on our end to increase that rate. But the way we find that rate is we just kind of say, okay, here's the list of people who got the plan, here's the date they got the plan, and then how many people showed up after that date. And so it's kind of changes between, I guess it was 47% most recently, and it was 51% last time we reported. So it's it's definitely a difficult thing to.
Yeah, maybe a little connected, again, in the report where you mentioned basically 8,000 Medi-Cal applications were submitted. Certainly, whether they all get connected to a primary care physician or a medical home, do we track at all whether they're able to then find services that they need? And also, are we able to sign up other than those that where it's denied, are we able to sign up 100% of all the people coming out on Medi-Cal?
I do think that most or all clients who are eligible for it are signed up. I'm not sure exactly how that works between AB 720 and then the individuals who come into the reentry center, because they are a lot of individuals are now being signed up in custody. In terms of tracking, we haven't been able to. We have just finished a new database that will allow us to do that better. The extent to which we can track will rely on SSA's data as well. So we'll definitely be working with that, and we'll be sure to include more on that in the next report.
Yeah, and it just sort of ties back to what you were saying about why not everybody sort of follows up with a visit, and the whole thing about custody health being the one signing them up and whatever sort of other kind of issues they're dealing with. But it seems like if they at least are signed up for Medi-Cal, they can at least have some access to the health needs that they have.
Yeah, and perhaps one thing we can do is kind of look into the hospital system and see if we can get some data on that as well to see if there's any connection there.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so that's pretty much it for transition plans. The last thing is, since July 2016, over 1,800 plans have been submitted. Okay, so now moving on to social services. So during that 6-month period, there were 1,271 applications, and from that, 650 individuals or households were awarded or allocated general assistance, 651 households CalFresh, and 199 clients got Medi-Cal. And for GA and CalFresh, about $624,000 were allocated in assistance. And if you look at the chart to the right there, the numbers haven't changed too much over time, but again, they've kind of fallen in the most recent quarter. And while this may be due to holidays, we'll be tracking this as well just to see if there's anything we can do to keep those numbers up. And then for behavioral health, we start at the reentry center, but they also have community services as well. So at the center, the team screens clients who come in, and they screen them for general needs. They also screen them for clinical needs, and then they kind of set up appointments, make referrals to substance use treatment and mental health. So during the 6-month period, they had 2,786 visits, and that was about 369 unique clients per month on average that they're seeing. They do see more individuals, but these are the individuals who had formal intakes. A lot of individuals just come for, quick assistance from the peer mentors. So from that, there were 532 critical needs screenings, 405 clinical needs screenings, 455 referrals to substance use treatment, and 165 referrals to mental health treatment. And if you look at the graph on the right, clinical screenings and mental health referrals appear to be declining significantly. So we will be working with behavioral health to kind of see why that is, to make sure that the data is accurate, and to make sure that we're doing our part to get those individuals into their center. So for the community services for substance use treatment and mental health, we still have to rely on AB 109 numbers only due to gaps between databases. So what we do here is we cross-reference an AB 109 master list, and we see who from that master list were admitted to treatment services after their release date. So for substance use treatment services, that's 351 individuals who were admitted into SUTs, and these are AB 109 individuals. So reentry in general probably has a lot more. And hopefully with the new database, we'll be able to track that better by getting lists of everyone who comes into our behavioral health center at the reentry center. So outpatient was the most common, as we've seen before. And then I want to mention that THUs are not treatment, they're kind of supplemental to treatment. So those who have THUs also have outpatient. They have to be enrolled in outpatient. And as you can see, looking at the total there, these have declined as well. So we want to make sure that at the end of the year report, we report on what's been happening with these trends, and we can really explore that more. So similar to SUTs, these are AB 109 individuals only. 483 individuals were admitted during the 6-month period to mental health treatment. Again, outpatient is the most common, followed by EPS, which is emergency psychiatric services. Residential is the next, and then FQHC stands for Federally Qualified Health Center, And the other category is stuff like Barbara Aaron's Pavilion and Skilled Nursing Facility. So these numbers, looking at the total, have stayed more consistent. They're not dropping off. Okay, Office of Supportive Housing. So they also have a office at the Reentry Center. Previously, we reported on this, but it's been, I think, 7 or 8 programs. They've consolidated that, restructured that into 2 main models. So there's the Reentry Rapid Rehousing programs, and there's 2 programs under that. And then there's the Emergency Assistance Program, which has existed for a while. So the triple RH programs, the Rapid Rehousing, there are 2. There's the normal one and then the exceptions, which is the RRHE there on the right. The exceptions is just for clients who don't meet the standard eligibility criteria for the HUD requirements. So we set aside some funding for an additional 20 slots there. So overall, in those rapid rehousing programs during the 6-month period, there was 128 enrollments and about 75 households housed. So 51 for the standard program, 24 for the exceptions program. And then for EAP, 92 households were assisted. The majority or the most common type of assistance is motel vouchers. These are for individuals who have something on the horizon but not something immediately when they're released from custody. So they're provided a motel voucher to kind of help them transition into housing. And then there's also late rent assistance, security deposit assistance, and rental assistance, which is a 3-month subsidy. So 14 people got the late rent, 12 got security deposit, and 10 got the 3-month subsidy. Okay, we haven't reported on this before, but we wanted to show you guys the work they're doing. So Public Defender has the reentry expungement program at our center as well, where paralegals kind of screen clients and support them and submit their petitions to the court for record clearance. So because this is new, we were only able to get 1 quarter. So this is fiscal year quarter 2, which is October through December. During this time period, 269 screening interviews were conducted. So out of that, 116 were eligible. And during the period, 524 dockets were submitted to the court for review. These are dockets, not individuals, so some individuals could have multiple dockets. But as you can see, they're very good at their screening because 501 out of the 524 were granted relief or cleared. And then as of December 31st, 218 cases were still waiting to be heard by the court. There is a backlog, as I understand it. Okay, that concludes the presentation. In the written report, we do have sections on our contracts and adult probation's contracts. However, we're waiting for the end of the fiscal year for outcomes to report on that. So we will report in much more detail at the end of the fiscal year on contracts.
Thank you both very much. Semi-annual reports very much appreciated. I remember when we started this, we had so little information, so little data, unable to compare to years prior. But now that we're comparing year over year, I remember when we started out with what is recidivism? How do we define recidivism? How do other people, how does the state define? And supervisors and all of us, almost everybody here goes out to the public and is talking about these things. And these were terms, recidivism, reentry, that were unfamiliar at the time until AB 109 came along. And I think now that we're able to show what progress and what difference. And the mere fact that we're not doing nothing, that you're doing such a great job preventing so many of these from being added to our homeless situation is awesome. I'm also looking forward to the relocation of the South County Reentry Center to Gilroy. That's exciting. So I'll look to our committee members. We've already had public comment on this item. Any comments or questions wishing to be made? None. With that, Supervisor, we'll consider the report received.
Yes, so I'll make that motion that we accept.
That, Marilyn, that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
We now move on to item number, and we look forward to your continued good work and progress reports and improvements and all the rest. It's a very, very, very positive thing that's coming out of this. This whole idea of reentry and people having a place to go and to try and turn their lives around.
No, thank you. And the Gilroy office for reentry did open on February 26th, and we're planning to do a grand reopening in April, and we'll send out an invitation.
Got it. And then elected to consider the reopening when you cut the ribbon.
Right, absolutely.
So I'm glad that you're up and running.
Yeah. And then in your packet, we did create an infographic It allows you to kind of get some highlights. And I really want to thank Chad, because if you look at the last page of the report, it shows about 18 or 19 different data sources that he has to go and get all the data. So it's quite a challenge.
So you don't want us to move to weekly reports, is what you're saying? We'll stick with semi-annual.
Thank you.
Good. Bless you. All right, thank you. Thank you very much. We now move on to item number 5, which is, let me just flip over here, receiving a report from the Office of the Sheriff. And I have a speaker card on that. So, Madam Sheriff, before you start, I'll ask Ms. Bassey to come forward.
Thank you. Before we talk about receiving the report from Sheriff Smith, I would like to talk about the fact that when I was raising my 3 boys in Gilroy, there was a horrendous gang crime in our local community, and there was a murder and there was a prosecution. And I remember that my children and I were very fearful, and that I didn't send my kids over to 10th Street, which was unfortunate because that was where the movie theater was. And then I grew up, and my kids grew up, and we moved to Los Gatos. And I learned that Stuart Scott, who was with the prosecutor's office, added some hyperbole to his closing statements, which constitutes prosecutorial misconduct. And he tried to get the person convicted based on making things up that the gang member had supposedly said. And Stuart Scott, this came out in a Supreme Court ruling, in California Supreme Court ruling, I believe. And nonetheless, Stuart Scott was elevated to our bench. And a month later, he was harassing various people in the public defender's office and everything else, and he got a slap on the wrist from the CJP for that. But that's the culture that we have. And as Sheriff Smith, as you said in your documentary in Web of Lies, we're Silicon Valley, and things look a little bit different here. So I hope when you do your report, you're going to talk about the gang of lawyers and judges, vocational examiners, custody experts, and everyone else who have taken over our courthouse. On January 20th, I tried to go to a retirement party of Judge Grilly in the courthouse. And when I got onto the 8th floor, I was met by several deputies who told me that I would be arrested if I came. The lawyers went back and forth. My public records requests on this show that the lawyers never paid for the courthouse when I was locked out. The gang that is taking over our community is no further away than the local courts. And Wikipedia defines gangs as involved in crime activities, extortion, and they often have a lookout. And you need to look at the lawyers and what's going
Ms.
on.
Bassey, you
family
need
courts.
to stop in your time.
Thank you.
All right, Sheriff, we'll turn to you and your staff.
Thank you. We do have a report, and if I can ask our staff members to introduce themselves and your position.
Good afternoon, members of the board, presiding judge, sheriff, under sheriff, district attorney, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dalia Rodriguez. I'm the captain assigned to civil division as well as special operations.
Angel Ekdow, management analyst with assigned to special operations.
Sergeant Alan Slaw, assigned to criminal investigations vice unit special operations.
Thank you.
You guys have our report for our end of the year 2017 statistical analysis of the gang related cases within our department's jurisdiction. As a reminder to the audience, this report provides, again, from January to December of 2017, a comparative analysis to the case data from the years prior, 2013 to 2016. The Sheriff's Office areas of responsibility currently include unincorporated areas of the county, county parks, contract cities, court facilities, custody facilities, and the VTA transit lines and stations. We're hoping if there are any questions, we'll be able to answer them at this time.
Thank you. Supervisor Yeager. I didn't have any question either. It's a short, concise report. Committee members? Nope, I see a smile on the sheriff's face. That's good.
I have a question.
Yes, please, Sylvia.
Just so that we're clear about how the label and category of gang member is, because as you know, there's obviously the legal definition, there would be the classification that the jail uses, there would be the interpretation of what a gang member is from the Sheriff's Office perspective. So can you clarify for us, when we're talking in the report about gang membership, can you clarify what you mean by that?
Sure. We look at various ways of identifying that. Sometimes it's self-admission from the people involved in the report. Sometimes it is jail classification, like you mentioned. Sometimes it's based off of probation, parole status, and how that system has classified them as well. And then also you mentioned the knowledge of the actual officer who's taken the report based on their training and experience and how they identify.
That answers your question? Good enough. Any other questions or comments? Thank you all very, very much for a very complete and, for me, an enlightening report. I appreciate that. And with that, Madam Clerk, we'll consider this report received. That's all right with you, Supervisor Yeager? Thank you. All right. We'll move on to item number 6, to receive a report from the Chief Probation Officer, Laura Garnett. Oh, no, we have sitting in. Thank you very much. Relating to the youth who committed serious offenses between 2013 and 17. And I would ask, before you start, we have a speaker card to hear from the speaker, and then we'll get your presentation. Ms. Bassey.
Thank you, and I appreciate the comment about identifying the gang activity, because we may have to do that a little bit differently as we move forward. This is a report about gang activity, or youth activity who committed serious offenses between 2013 and 17, which may just miss the mark of the young men who were involved in the allegations related to Audrey Pott. My son knew those kids, and of them, he went to Los Gatos High at the time that they were involved in this, and my son had already left for college, but we knew of the families that were involved. And one thing that is very concerning is that we are being reactionary. We are reacting to certain things and not looking deeper at the problem. The people who are youth who are committing serious crimes. It looks different in Silicon Valley. It may involve prescription misuse and abuse that is no different than meth heads in areas that our community doesn't resemble. It may look like somebody grabbing a gun from their parents' safe because they're so frustrated over the custody issues that our courts are forcing them through. These children are going through custody cases where parents are fighting over them with their Silicon Valley money, where custody evaluators are being appointed, they're being forced into therapy, and they're being forced into supervised visits, and even sent to reunification camps that are like Guantanamo. We have too many people with too much money doing things to our children that are not overtly obvious and that you need to start looking at. And Patricia Lucas, you recently accepted state and federal grants for supervised visits in the courthouse. And I want you to know that the parents that are under orders to be under supervised visits go to those courthouses anxious to see their children. They have been kept from their children for virtually no reason other than the discrediting of a highly paid attorney. And when they get to the courthouse to finally see their children, they won't be able to take a photograph with themselves with their children because of your order, Patricia Lucas. And you need to think about what you're doing to our youth.
Thank you. And with that, we'll turn to you and your staff for your report.
Thank you, Supervisor Wasserman. So the Probation Department's Research and Development team has prepared a report and as a result, recent concerns of violent crime committed by young people or youth in our communities. And this is a 5-year report, just in an effort, a snapshot in an effort to understand more about this population. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Holly Child, our research director, and Craig Carpenter, our research specialist.
Good afternoon. We appreciate you giving us some time on your agenda today to talk about this recent report. So, again, I'm Holly Child. I'm the director of the research unit for probation.
And good afternoon, Craig Carpenter, research and evaluation specialist.
And so to give you a little bit of background of this report, we do an annual report. So I think most of you in here probably already know about that, but for those who are listening or watching, we do provide most of our reports on our website. If anybody's ever interested in following up, this particular report is also on our website if anybody would like to look up that information. So again, thinking about those youth who are committing serious offenses, one of the things that we need to look at in particular is public safety. And so these youth obviously are the ones that are probably most indicative of what public safety issues result in. So we decided to take a closer look, and we looked at a sampling of time from 2013 to 2017. One of the things that we hoped to result from this report is to really take a look at these kids who are coming in, committing these offenses. What are their needs? What are their challenges? Kind of what are their journeys? And do we have the best approaches or programming or services in place to meet their needs? And this again is a public report, so just to give you kind of a Cliff Note version, I'm sure most of the people in the room already know this, but thinking about adolescence is very different than thinking about someone who might be kind of the average age of what we see on the adult side. And so thinking about the development of youth in general, the youth brain is already not developed until their early 20s. And a lot of the kids that we see have slowed development due to abuse, neglect, substance use. And so we just wanted to talk about that for those who are listening in who may not know that much about adolescent development or kind of juveniles in general. So to talk about today's study, we did look from 2 calendar years. So we looked at calendar years 2013 to 2017. And within that time frame, we only looked at a certain set of serious offenses. And I will state that this isn't the final list of what should be considered serious offenses. This is just a list of offenses that came through multiple discussions with other stakeholders and other partners. And so we're only looking at these offenses in this report. Youth who commit anything outside will not be included in this report, so just keep that in mind. So from 2013 to 2017, there were 2,356 unduplicated youth who were referred to our department, and those youth had 4,227 offenses.
And if I may, just for clarification,
Sure.
when you say 2013 to 17, is that a 4-year period?
It is correct.
Okay.
So it would be 13, 14,
14,
15,
15. So I just want to make
five,
sure.
Sorry, 5 years.
I'm just doing some division in my head, and I'm wondering if that's 4 years or 5 years.
It's 5 years.
So
sorry.
it's through 2017?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Correct. So to take a look at the kids who were in this particular study, in this sample, 55% of them were 16 and older, 37% of them were aged 14 to 15, and 8% of them were aged 13 and under. Latino youth were overrepresented in this particular sample, as we see in the overall system, and the sample consisted of primarily boys. So we decided to, when we're looking at this, to look at quarterly trends. We think that gives you kind of an idea of what's happening over time. And so this chart is showing you the number of referrals that the department received related to these particular offenses from 2013 to 2017. As you can see, the bars are up and down. We right now don't have any kind of statistical trend upward or downward. But as we'll talk about today, there are some things that we do need to talk about that happened in 2017. One of the things that we did find in 2017 supports kind of what we know in overall criminology research, which is that traditionally we've seen that there's a small amount of people who are responsible for a proportionately larger amount of offenses. In 2017, that held very true for youth in this particular sample. As you see in 2016, 9% of youth had 3 or more referrals in that calendar year, versus in 2017, we had 15% of youth that had 3 or more referrals. I think most of the board, most of the committee here, and a lot of the stakeholders that are listening in are aware that we had some unusual events in 2017 where we had groupings of kids that we don't traditionally see. So we would have a large number of kids kind of committing a lot of offenses together. And so that was a very unusual phenomenon we're discovering. We've heard from fellow counties that is something they've seen, but we haven't seen a consistent trend, so we haven't been able to talk about how to predict, and really there's not a lot of information on how to intervene with these kids who are kind of meeting up on social media and connecting in ways that we haven't seen them connect before. What's really kind of important to talk about too is when we talk about referrals, that of those kids who committed the most referrals in 2017, so for example the top 10 youth, 8 of those were in one of those groupings of kids that committed offenses together. And of those 10, 5 of them had not touched our system before. In other words, they hadn't had a case with probation. Maybe they touched law enforcement in some way. Maybe they were working with some sort of discipline through the educational system. But as far as probation goes, 5 of those top 10 youth had not touched our system in probation before. So that is also something that's very different about these groupings of kids. Some offenses had some unusual spikes, which are really important. So if you look at carjacking, this is a 6-month period, or this is looking at annually, but the last year, 2017, we broke into a 6-month period to show you there was an unusual spike from July to December. Again, that was also correlated with a grouping of kids who went out and committed some offenses together. But some of the offenses that we do track remained low. And these are just examples. If you look at the overall report, we give you a number of offenses broken out into different time periods, so you can see the different numbers of referrals for those offenses over time. And there's also additional ones in the appendix if you'd like to look at some of those in more detail.
And if I may, on that prior slide, when you said...
This one?
Yes. No. Yes, thank you. When you said remained low, compared to 10-year average, compared to other
in the
areas?
5-year period.
Okay, so I'm looking at the blue bars, which say their assault with a deadly weapon.
Correct.
Over the last 5 years, 68, 53, 35, 34, 35. How does that stack up compared to other communities or similar populations, or is that high? Is that low? Is that average?
We haven't looked at fellow counties to see what those particular offenses look like, so we don't have that particular information. We only know that in this particular offense, what it might look like with other offenses in our county, but we don't have information from other counties on if that's a common trend.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to ask if somebody says to me, is juvenile crime up or is juvenile crime down? You know, it all depends if you're talking last 5 years or 10 years or...
So juvenile crime in general over the past decade has decreased significantly. So the trend that we see in Santa Clara County mirrors the state and also mirrors the national trends, which is juvenile crime is down nationally, and we see that here. If you look at 10 years of juvenile justice data from Santa Clara County, there has been a significant decrease from 2008 to 2018.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you. Yes, Molly.
Thank you. I had a quick question related to the previous slide showing the carjacking increase in 2017. Is that carjacking sustained petitions, or is that carjacking referrals by law enforcement, or is that charges from the DA?
So these are referrals, and something that's important to point out is that so if you had one carjacking offense that involved 5 youth, they would be counted 5 times within that 38 number. So it's referrals and not necessarily offenses as such.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Miguel.
Thank you. And on the same slide, because 38 is such a spike, and I think I heard you say that a number of these were related to a group of kids that were on a spree, if you will.
Correct.
Do you know how many of the 38, just to give us an idea, if you were to take that one incident out, what we would be
I don't
looking
have
at?
that information handy, but we can get that for you and provide it.
That'd be very helpful.
Hi, Mariel Caballero, Deputy Director of the Probation Department. I also just wanted to point out that when we're talking about referrals, we are not talking about offense dates. So one thing to notice about all of these is that if a youth comes into us and is then later matched to crimes that occurred previous, so for example, they're brought to us in March of 2018 and they've committed crimes in 2017, those crimes would show up in 2018 because we're looking at when the youth is referred to us, not when the crime occurred. We are hopefully in the future going to be looking at offense dates perhaps to get a better sense, but one thing to notice in addition to the fact that this could be 5 youth who committed one crime together is that this could also be crimes that were committed at other times in the year, but this is when the department received the referral.
Thank you for that clarification. Also, I'd spoken with one of the police chiefs in one of the cities in my district, and he mentioned while January typical car thefts were 20 over the last couple of years, it was 120 in this particular January, and again, it was attributed to a specific carjacking ring, I guess you might say, that came and made things spike.
Yeah,
and so
I think that's a great point that also Mariel's talking about and you're talking about is really if we look from year to year, you kind of miss some of those nuances of those unusual events that might drive crime. And I think, knowing that we have these unusual groupings are still very important to track and monitor because if they do continue, then it is something that definitely needs to change what we're doing to respond to that in the community. But for now, it's still an unknown, so we're tracking it very carefully in 2018, but it's definitely a point to be aware of.
Thank you. Yes.
So regarding the unusual groupings of youths, do these youth live in county, or are they from out of county?
So the majority, we haven't actually in the report broken down by zip code, but we can go away and do that. But the majority are in-county youth from memory.
Thank you. Please continue.
That's good. We like it when people have questions.
There you go. Good.
So we know they're actually listening. Thank you. So I think what's really important too is to talk about, these are the referrals. Again, once a youth is brought to the hall, they're arrested and they're brought to the hall. One of the discussions we've been having is, well, what happens to them? And so if you look over time, the blue bars are the number of duplicated youth who are brought to the hall. So a youth may be brought to the hall more than once, depending upon their activity. The gray line that you see going across is the number of youth who are detained. What's really nice about kind of this graphic and thinking about this is that we have a booking protocol that was developed by multiple stakeholders. We also use a standardized risk tool at the hall to determine the risk that a youth may have of not appearing at their next court date or committing a new offense. And it shows basically that based upon kind of the process that we have in place, we're holding 92% of kids that commit these particular set of offenses. And that means that the kids who are being brought to us are matching the booking protocol. So what's in place as it is right now is working as designed.
Yes, please, Jeff. Mr. Rose. Your mic. There you go.
So this graph says that 92% of the kids that are arrested and brought to juvenile hall are detained. That's what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
And that's in accordance with the risk assessment tool that you're using?
And the booking protocol.
And the booking protocol. Residential burglary is not an offense that you book in the juvenile hall, though, for. Is that correct?
Well, I think, do you want to?
Or Kathy, do you want me to respond, or do you want to respond? Okay. So I think I would say that on a first offense, depending on the situation, we may or may not book. We actually do have about a 25% override rate, which means that for youth who commit crimes where the booking protocol and or the risk assessment say that we should not be detaining youth, we do detain them because of community safety or self-victim and community issues. In the last several years, we've actually detained 88% of all youth who were brought to juvenile hall. So this slide shows you the particular offenses in this report, but if you look at all offenses, which in 2016 was roughly 1,100 or so, maybe 1,200 offenses youth were brought to juvenile hall, we detained 88% of those. So residential burglary can be one that is released because it's a DEJ eligible offense, but that doesn't mean that we're releasing every youth who commits a residential burglary. It's really dependent on the screening officer's discretion.
Are you finished?
Yes.
But the booking protocol does not say that someone should be arrested and brought to juvenile hall for residential burglary because it's DJJ eligible or whatever the protocol is, correct?
It is deferred entry of judgment eligible, which is defined by statute for a youth who comes in on a first-time offense which may be a residential burglary. They may or may not be held in juvenile hall. However, if we do get youth on multiple, it depends on the circumstances in which they are brought into juvenile hall, but they may or they may not. But most likely, if it's their first-time offense being referred to us, then probably not.
What if it's their second residential burglary arrest? Will they be detained then?
It would depend on the youth circumstances. There's a list of factors.
So the answer is they may not be detained.
They may or may not again.
How about 3 times?
Again, it's on an individual basis. Typically, if we see youth being brought in on multiple offenses, what we've been seeing as of recent is we'll have a youth brought in on 1 residential burglary or 2 residential burglaries. They may be held. Then law enforcement gets additional hits while they're in custody, at which point then they're held. Or if they're released on some type of restriction, then we get multiple hits. Law enforcement gets other hits. The district attorney's, your offices reviews it, and then the youth may end up being remanded into custody. But most likely what's happening is we're seeing kids while they're in custody either for a similar offense or a different offense and getting new referrals of which they're already in custody.
Yeah, we have seen.
May I also add something?
Oh, sure.
Yes, I was looking where the voice was coming from.
I believe that I think it's important to point out that let's assume it's a third offense for residential burglary. It depends on very critical, important factors, including the age of the minor. So if the minor is under 16, for example, 14 or 15, then not only is the risk assessment almost even not even capturing that, maybe perhaps there's an override, but the initial detention decision by the probation department is then reviewed by a judge within a few days or within a day or two at most. And at that point, it would be the judicial officer's decision on whether or not the interest of the community, protecting the public, versus the dangers of keeping a young child in detention would override it. So we talked about, and we saw the brain, the detention conditions and the idea of detaining a minor, even if it's for a short period of time, could be counterproductive to the interests of public safety, because that minor could be very easily led and influenced in a negative way by other minors in the detention facility that in the end could be much more detrimental. So I think it's important to point out that the decision point at the beginning is only one stage in the process.
Thank you. Certainly not simple. Any further discussion here on the committee? Please resume.
Great. I feel like you were ahead of me because we were going to briefly talk about that. No, that's good. That's great. It's a great segue. I appreciate the help. And so we did want to talk about the negative impacts on incarceration. I think being really thoughtful as a county about what we're using incarceration for, because it's not necessarily even being in the facility that is traumatizing. It's being removed from the things that you know. And so that mirrors a lot of what we see in child welfare, where kids are removed from homes where perhaps there's mild abuse and neglect, and those kids still end up with worse outcomes because they're being removed. And being physically removed from your environment actually is a very traumatic experience. And if you've seen any of the ACEs studies, we know that that has a significant impact on kids. So I think one of the things that we're really thinking of is balancing public safety with not causing more harm for some of the youth that we see in the system. So this is an example of the referrals that have been petitioned. So now, the referrals received, now it's being petitioned. This is, again, in 6-month increments from 2013 to 2017. And I think the point when we talked about when referrals come in, the referral date is not necessarily the offense date. So a good example is there was a presentation we saw where someone had talked about a youth who had multiple referrals, but those referrals, that particular youth was incarcerated and through investigation and fingerprinting was connected to other offenses and received multiple new referrals while that person was incarcerated, while that youth was incarcerated. So when you see a referral, it doesn't necessarily mean that's when the offense occurred, but again, that's when the referral was received, and I think that's an important distinction. We did have a great meeting with the DA's office. We've also met with other partners in child welfare and education, and we've talked about how we can have a uniform way of talking about data, a uniform way of presenting information. And one of the things that we have talked about is really trying to start looking at offense date, because that's the date of the behavior. And so that is something we're exploring moving forward. We also saw some unusual spike in some of the offenses, for example, burglaries. So there was a huge spike in January through June, but then it went back down in July through December of those that are petitioned. And so again, this is 6-month increments from 2013 to 2017, but it can show you the trends, that there isn't necessarily an up or down. It's kind of all over the place at the moment. And these are petitions that are sustained. And from 2013, 2017, if you look at the blue bars, those are the number of sustained petitions. The gray line, again, is the number of youth with sustained petitions. It's the unduplicated count. So what you see here, which is another example, is that you have 232 youth who had between them 398 sustained petitions. And so if you remember, in 2017, we did have a larger number of youth who had more referrals than we've seen in the past. And again, it was due to some of those unusual groupings that we saw. Really quick, just to give you an idea of referrals, the top 10 youth were responsible in this particular study for, I believe, 135 referrals, the top 10 youth. And of those, I think 118 were all related to one grouping of kids, so to give you some indication. So we really wanted to learn more about these youth. As probation, we're responsible for treatment and rehabilitation, thinking about how we work with these youth to give them the skills they need to be resilient. And so one of the tools that we use is the Juvenile Assessment Intervention System, and this is a standardized tool that's been validated through the National Council on Crime and Delinquency, and it gives us two things. It gives us criminogenic risk, which is low, moderate, and high, and that's the risk of that youth reoffending. If you look at the breakout of kids in this particular sample, most of the kids actually fell within the moderate to low risk ranges. In the report, we give you a general idea of some of the recidivism rates, and some of the recidivism rates we're seeing in our county are lower than some of our sister counties, so we're hoping to keep that a continued trend and to keep working towards doing a better job with these youth. The other information that the tool gives us is what we call criminogenic needs, and these are needs that are driving factors. They're the drivers behind the behaviors of these kids. And so we're giving you a snapshot. In the report, we've given you a much more detailed description, but these are some of the kind of key points we wanted to highlight. The first one is abuse and neglect. And so 65% of girls and 41% of boys said that their parents were referred to child welfare for abusing or neglecting them. And girls had more out-of-home replacements. So 19% of girls in this particular sample had out-of-home placements. One of the things that we are doing, we've been working with child welfare on really thinking about how we might intervene with these kids earlier and trying to figure out a way to stop kind of that move from child welfare over to probation. In education, we saw that 39% of boys had been suspended at least once, but 62% of girls in this sample had been enrolled in 2 or more schools, were not attending school or had dropped out. So education is still a big struggle and a big area of need for these youth. In mental health, we saw that 12% of boys and 22% of girls had psychological or psychiatric treatment needs. And what was really kind of a sad statistic was that 19% of girls and 12% of boys had reported attempting suicide, which is much higher than general population. And finally, substance use, which I think everyone on this committee knows, that over half of boys and girls reported issues that actually impaired their daily functioning, and so needed some kind of significant intervention with regards to substance use. And again, in the report, we've given you a much more detailed breakout. So we've been working with multiple partners. We've been working with Department of Education, Child Welfare, and really thinking about what might be some good approaches. We're looking at our range of services. Are we providing the best services? We're continually striving to do better, and we'll continue to keep looking at this information to monitor. Do you have any other questions?
Thank you. I appreciate that. That detention issue that you raised is really a catch-22. You know, you retain them, and they may learn or duplicate worse behavior. You don't retain them, and they may commit another crime. It's certainly not an easy fix. Your light on. Did you have further comments or questions?
Yes, I think I just wanted to follow up with Dr. Child about, with our analysis of the criminogenic factors that impact youth, and then our examination of the data in terms of looking at the spikes in crime and the trends. And one really critical fact that you brought out in terms of the recent events and crimes that youth are committing and how they're committing them, and the role that perhaps social media has in how now they're grouping together outside of what we have normally considered to be usual, or at least in the past, social networks that we've had. So they're going outside of their own communities and they're just associated in a different way. So that's a new dynamic that perhaps didn't exist 10 years ago. But along those lines, when you do have the ability to dig deeper into who these children are, not only how they are connecting, but also what criminogenic factors do they have? What issues are impacting them to get to that negative peer group that is leading them to act in a certain way? Can you elaborate a little bit further about that work that you may or may not be doing in terms of understanding these youth so that we can then learn and then be able to adapt to these types of trends?
Sure. And we also suspect that there might be kids that we don't actually know are connected sometimes with these groups. But when Craig and I have actually gone through and we've read a lot of their case histories. And some of the similarities we see between these kids is definitely the child welfare involvement. The other thing is quite a large number of these kids had some sort of IEP or some sort of learning disability. And so that seemed to be a larger percentage of those kids than we traditionally see in some of the other groupings. When you read the stories, you see a lot of parents who just don't know what to do because, you know, they're struggling. They're working a lot. They're working 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet, and they are struggling to get kids where they need to be and to be able to monitor them. And so we have some of those kids have parents who are very involved and engaged, some do not. It really varies, but it's just what you see is a lot of child welfare involvement, educational struggles, and parenting where they're really struggling to try to either make ends meet and just survive, or they themselves are struggling. So,
thank you.
Supervisor.
Yes, thank you. Good report. Thank you. In your report, you mentioned that 8% of the youth were age 13 and under. Could you talk a little bit about what kind of programs, if any, we have available for them when they enter into our system?
That's a fantastic question. Yeah, go ahead.
So we are doing a lot of research around looking at interventions for kids specific to 14 and under, because the interventions and the services that we provide now are typically for older youth, since we're starting to see an increase in younger kids not just committing auto thefts or burglaries, but some pretty serious crimes. And so we are looking, we just had a call recently with Dr. Kelly out at Stanford University. Holly and her team has done some research on some specific interventions for some of those younger youth. So we're in the process of exploring the possibility of using multi-systemic therapy as a factor or as an intervention that focuses on the family as a whole for some of the younger youth. The other thing that Dr. Child also mentioned was the involvement with Department of Family and Children's Services. We're seeing a high number of younger youth who also are either dependents or have had previous histories with child welfare. And so we are exploring the possibility of developing the same intervention for some of the younger youth who may be involved with the child welfare system who have not yet entered the juvenile justice system, just as more of a stronger preventive effort. And we are in the process of looking at some research in terms of trying to identify some of those predictive factors to kind of help narrow down that population.
And do we know if that intervention is often successful, if we're able to sort of catch a particularly young person, 10 to 14, so that they don't go on to making other crimes?
Well, I don't know that anything is guaranteed, but through our conversations with Dr. Kelly, he does indicate that for youth who are at home and not in custody and do not necessarily need removal, that multi-systemic therapy does seem to work on the younger population. Typically, it is related to other family factors that are happening, and by addressing the family as a unit as a whole could possibly have an impact on the behaviors of the young people. Not only their behaviors that we're seeing in our system, but also the younger siblings of the youth in an effort to prevent possibility of siblings coming into the system. Another intervention for kids who may need removal is multi-treatment foster care, which is another option that we are exploring as well.
Yeah, maybe at a future meeting, talk a little bit more about the ideas that are out there and what we might be able to do to work with this group of kids. Thanks.
Thank you. And with that, we'll conclude our meeting today, and we'll all get back together on April 18th at 2 p.m. Thank you all very much.